The reason that we wanted to have this get together today is some of the older business owners in town started talking about what are we doing to help the younger business owners develop in their business skills and their leadership skills. And I think the answer was not a whole lot. So at some point, some of the folks that are in their 60s or their 70s might not want to be involved in the business community at some point, and the next generation is going to come up and fill that void. So what we talked about was having a different business owner give a 1-hour presentation, a little bit about their business, what they've done wrong, what they did well, and then maybe a few tips of wisdom that could be beneficial to anybody, but specifically the younger generation. So that's the purpose of this. When we're done, we'll talk about it. If you think it's worth it, I could probably have this 20 or 30 times. There's all kinds of business owners in town that I'm sure would be glad to share some of their expertise with you. So we'll go ahead and start. My wife and I got married about 31 years ago, and we were looking for a place to start a business. I'm a physical therapist. She came from a construction background. She was running a construction company when I met her. And we went to different towns on the weekends for several months looking for a place to live. We were living in Albuquerque. And we came down to Alamogordo, and things just all kind of fell into place. It was real interesting how the people tried to help us. And I'm telling you, that was huge. I was at an open house, or a groundbreaking for a new hotel that's going to be in Alamogordo. And one of the things the new owner said was, one of the reasons they wanted to come to Alamogordo was because they felt like people had really stood up and tried to help them. So that's one of the reasons we came to Alamogordo. I knew there was also a good opportunity for a physical therapist because they had not had the best service before I got here. And I started out in the basement. The people that were here before me didn't do a very good job, which was to my benefit. So I knew between those two, I could only go up. No other way about it. So we started growing and working, and my wife and I, the first couple of years we were here, we probably worked at least 80 hours a week. It took a lot to get things going. Business started coming really fast. In fact, so fast that I was getting to work at 6 in the morning and seeing my last patient at 9 o'clock at night. The first year that we were here, we worked 51 out of 52 weekends. And I think that weekend we were gone was when my sister got married. So it took an extraordinary amount of effort to get things started. But once you get the ball rolling, then it gets a little easier and a little easier. So we had our physical therapy clinic here. In about 1995, we had a lot of changes in healthcare with managed care, and it reduced the amount of times that people could come for therapy. So I knew that I was going to have to lay off 2 therapists, and I didn't want to do that. So we started looking around in other towns, and that's when we opened a clinic in Artesia. So we had that clinic going for a couple of years, and then we saw some opportunities in Carlsbad, which is just 30 miles away, had the same doctors, the same medical community. So we opened a place in Carlsbad. As time went by, we started investing in real estate because we wanted something that we could take the profits from our business and do something with. I'm not a big fan of the stock market, so we wanted to do something that was what I call a tangible investment, something that you could reach over and touch. So we did that, and then last year we purchased Alamogordo Land Survey Company. So now my family is in the land survey business. My son Baxter over here is the president of that company. He's the one running it. And we just bought the apartment complex off of Juniper and Indian Wells it used to be called, what was it? Vista del Sol. Now it's called Juniper Apartments. So we started investing in real estate. My wife and I are involved in a commercial and a residential real estate project down in Mississippi that has, we already have several buildings down there. So that's kind of what we do, and it started out just moving to Alamogordo and trying to start a physical therapy company. So what I wanted to do is talk to you about 10 things. You have a list here. And I want to go down each one of them, and then we'll leave a few minutes for questions at the end if you have it. At the bottom are 3 books. Somebody said, what 3 books should you read if you were interested in business? So I've got 3 of them there, and I'm going to tell you that I don't agree with everything that's in these books, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you ever heard of that? It's the biggest selling business book of all times. 2 things that you'll learn from that. One is about the concept of investing for cash flow. And the other is about, he calls it the quadrant, where you're either an employee, an investor, business owner, and how you move through life to those different quadrants. So just that concept, I think, is really interesting. See at the top, have you ever heard of Zig Ziglar? Best book I ever got. Somebody bought that book for me when I was 19. I was really struggling. I wasn't doing well in school. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I read that Zig Ziglar book, and it just opened a whole new world to me as far as your attitude. And specifically, what I learned was that people that write down goals that are time-based are much more successful than people that don't. So if you don't write your goals down and put some time limits on them, you become what they call a wandering generality. And I didn't want to be one of those. The world's full of those. And I'm grateful to those people because it makes it easier for me to succeed. The last one is Business Secrets of the Bible. And I just read this book maybe a year ago. It's written by a guy named Daniel Lappin, who's a rabbi. And in his books, he's got several of them, but he talks about how business got started, what business really is. And the interesting part is he talks about why Jewish people have the reputation for being wealthier than most other people. And he cites some statistics like the number of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. There's a disproportionate amount of people in that position that are Jewish. And so he goes into some of the reasons as to why he thinks that happens. So if you read those 3 books, it's at least a good start for you. I also have Gary Johnston's seminars. Gary Johnston is a guy my family and I met about 4 years ago that puts on some classes to teach about investing, financial strategies, real estate, how to use a financial calculator, those kinds of things. He doesn't sell a program. There are some of these people that sell these programs. So you go to their seminar and you give them your visa for $40,000 and then they sell you some kind of program. Gary's is just simple common sense. Here's how you develop wealth over time. He teaches a seminar called Financial Freedom. It's a 3-day seminar. My wife and I went to it 3 or 4 years ago maybe. Changed our life about how we look at things. We've taken our kids to it, and I think it's had an impact on them. So I just got back from another seminar he had this last weekend called Masters of Real Estate, where they have 6 or 7 different speakers come and talk. One of my favorite speakers at this seminar last weekend is a lady that lives in Virginia named Jeannie. Jeannie was young married lady with 3 kids, and now she owns a bunch of properties, mostly college housing. Her latest one is a $48 million apartment complex. So she started going to some of these Gary Johnston type courses, and now here it is many years later. She's got 60 or 70 employees, and I don't know how many apartment units, but just an amazing lady. And if you met her, she would never stand out in a crowd. So she's just a real person. So anyway, if you ever want to think about going to one of the Gary Johnston seminars, probably some of the best money you'll ever invest in yourself. So let's talk about the concept of business. So back about the time that they had the pyramids, there were 3 guys, Mo, Larry, and Curly. And so Mo, Larry, and Curly were kind of off to themselves, and they all did the same thing. They raised goats, they made cheese, and most of their favorite was they made wine. So they all 3 did that. And then over time, what they started figuring out is Mo started looking over at Larry, and Larry's goats were a lot bigger, a lot meatier, gave more milk. So Mo noticed that Larry was better at raising goats. And Larry started noticing that Mo made cheese that was a whole lot better than the other guys. And then Curly really liked Mo's wine. And Mo liked the cheese that Curly made. So the problem that the people back then had was you can't do everything. You can't be good at making cheese, wine, raising goats. So there had to be some kind of a market for specialization. Does that make sense? So you can't learn everything. So here's how this works. If this lady right here, Molly, I think is her name, if she needs physical therapy, she's probably going to come to me and not Zuni Electric. And if I need to have some kind of electrical work, I'm probably going to go to Zuni Electric and not over to Desert Sun. So that's how business got started, was changing services that you can't do yourself. And they call it the era of specialization. The era of specialization. So if you have a skill, the idea is to use that skill to serve other people. To serve other people. And proportionally, usually, your income is directly related to the number of people that you serve. And if you don't believe that, let's talk about who makes the most money in the world right now, a guy named Bill Gates. So how many people has Bill served with his product compared to your own business? Pardon me? A bazillion. That's a big number. So your income is going to be tied directly, usually, to the number of people that you serve. Everybody good with that? Let's talk about the 70-10-10-10 rule. Anybody familiar with that? I wasn't either until I started taking these classes. So this is how, in theory, you should chop up the money that you have coming in each month, your income. So the 70% is going to go to your monthly living expenses, your utilities, your, what else you got? Rent, food, car payment, insurance payment, that kind of stuff. 10% is going to go to savings. So you've got some extra money in case you hit a bad spot. This 10% will be for tithing or given to charity. Now, the views I'm about to give you are my views. You may not agree with me, and that's fine. But I know that in the Bible, it talks about that you're supposed to tithe 10%. And if you don't do that, I don't think you're following God's will. Now, I'm not a minister like Justin over here, but the only place I know in the Bible where it says to challenge God is about giving. He's shaking his head yes, so that must be right. So does that mean if you tithe that you're going to make more money? I don't think it does, but I do think it means that you'll be blessed in some way. Might be kids, might be family, might be a new job. And then the final statement that I heard about that concept is that if you do not tithe, you're stealing from God, number one. And number two, you're decreasing your chances to advance yourself. So here's what I've noticed. People that make their own money, that tithe, for some reason, seem in general to do a whole lot better than people I know that don't. So now let's talk about the last 10%, because that's probably what everybody's thinking about, because these three are pretty standard. So let's talk about what your biggest assets are in your life. If you were going to list some assets, what would they be? Somebody might say cash. What other kind of assets do you have? Pardon me? Intellectual. Okay, what else? Home. Is that what somebody said? Home. Okay. What else? Is that all assets? Now, if you were smart, you would say your girlfriend, who also happens to be my daughter. I'm trying to help you out, Billy. Write it down. So we're going to put Molly. So certainly, I will tell you one of my very top assets is my wife, Lynn, because I think you can accomplish a lot more if you have a good life partner. So what are we going to spend this money on? What is your number one asset? Your brain. Your brain is what allows you to think and earn a living. So here's what I propose to you. If this is one of your most valuable assets, I think it's appropriate to allot 10% of your income towards continuing ed of some kind. If you don't, I can guarantee you that there are other people that are, and they're probably moving ahead of where you are. Now, here's the deal. If you play it right, you might get to the point where you can't spend 10% on continuing ed because you're making so much money. So if you get to that point, what could you do with some of that thinking money? You could send somebody else to a seminar or help them out. So, all right, how to double your wealth. You ready for this? I think this is why a lot of people came. 2 words. Stay married. Stay married. Any of you know anybody that's ever gotten a divorce? Did they have money? Did they have more money or less money the first day of their divorce? I haven't met one yet that has more, if it's a community property state. So back in school, I remember doing this equation. And I remember thinking, that is so ridiculous. Why would I need to learn how to multiply fractions? Okay? So let's say you're a guy and you're worth $1 million in cash. And you do something and it ends up in a divorce. That's your first path right there. How much money do you have now? About $500,000. Is that right? I'm math good with that? Now let's say over the next year, you build it up to $600,000. You made another chickie baby, and that ends up in a divorce. Now how much money do you have? $300,000. Now let's say you raise it up to $400,000. You work real hard. Chickie baby number 3 comes by, and you get a divorce from them. How much money do you have now? How much money did you have when you started out? I know this guy. It's not me, but I know this guy. I know several people that this has happened to. So business, or when you get married, everybody thinks it's all kissy baby, all this, you're so wonderful, all that kind of stuff. But you got to think about marriage is also has a business component to it. And if you think about it, business and marriage, one of the functions of that, both of those, is to please or serve, I should say, another person. So if you're thinking about getting married, you want to try to do it right. Now, I know sometimes divorce is necessary. I'm not making any moral judgments. I'm just trying to show you that marriage is not just a kissy-kissy relationship. It's also a business relationship. So it's something to think about. The most common holes in your boat. The most common holes in your boat. I had an accountant years ago when I was in my late 30s and early 40s. I just turned 60 a few months ago, so it's been a while. And he started to talk to me about boring holes in your boat. And I didn't know what he was talking about. So he said the phenomenon is that you have I'm going to say a guy, it could be a girl, it could be either one. You have a person who works really hard through their 20s and their 30s, maybe even up till they're about 45 or so. and they start making money and they're successful, and they start boring holes in their boat for some reason. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen this. Drugs, alcohol, pornography. You can just make a whole list of things that people do to sabotage themselves and start boring holes in your boat. So if you're in that age range and you see people, some of your buddies that are starting to do like this with the drill, you might want to talk to them about that, because I've seen it more times than I could count. And if you bore enough holes in your boat, this is the situation you can get in. And I think probably everybody loses in that situation. So if you find yourself boring holes in your boat, ask for some help. If you have some friends that are boring holes in their boat, try to help them out so they don't do that. It's better to plug those holes than you don't have to sink. Why standing is important. How are we doing on time? What time is it?
You're good.
Pardon me? Oh, we're good. Okay, so this is an observation I've made that is a very common characteristic of anybody that's successful. And I've noticed that a lot of people that aren't successful don't do this. Now, I'm not saying that if you do what I'm about to show you, it's going to make you successful, but it gets you thinking. So I walked over to Bob Flott. I'm at McDonald's, and he's sitting there at the chair. And I walk over and I say, "Hey, Bob, how you doing?"
Let's see. Big guy, I'm doing good.
There you go. Now, did you notice what Bob just did? He stood up. What does that mean? Sign of respect. You got it. So when I first moved to town, I started noticing people like Jim Harris, Shelby Miller, Randy Raven, this guy right back here, Mr. G.D. Oliver. Whenever somebody comes into their office or comes up to them and they're sitting, boy, they are up like a jack in the box. And it makes the person feel like they're important. If you just sit there like a lump on a log, they're going to think that you don't really care about talking to them. So it sounds like a small thing, but I'm going to tell you that I think body language is probably 70% of communication. I don't know that it's all verbal. So if you walk into a business and the secretary is sitting there texting and doesn't even look up to talk to you, how does it make you feel versus what Bob just did right now? So just a tip for you there. One of the most important things I've learned to help me be a success, the algebraic method of communication and how it raises your smarts. Does anybody know what the algebraic method of communication is? We've already done some algebra here, so we'll get rid of that. So here's the algebraic method of communication. Little smiley face guy there. I'm not a very good drawer, but that's okay. So how can you look at that picture and come up with an algebraic method of communication? Let's look at this. How many ears do you have? 2. How many mouths do you have? 1. So that's your algebraic method of communication. That means for 2/3 of the time, you shouldn't be talking. And 1/3 of the time, maybe it's okay to do some talking. So here's what I've learned over time. I already know what I know, but I don't know what you know, or you, or you. And it's real hard to learn when you're running your mouth. So I was at a conference this last weekend that I was just telling you about, and this young man came up to me. He's about 30, and he's interested in real estate, had never done any, didn't really know anything too much about it. And he asked me, have I ever invested in some real estate? And I said, yeah. And the next 15 minutes of the break, he proceeded to have diarrhea of the mouth and tell me how wonderful he was and all these things he was going to do. And the whole time I just listened, I was polite, but what I was thinking is, this 15 minutes, if you were to shut up and ask me a question, you might learn something. So I see this all the time, especially in people under 40, 45. So they seem to tend to want to tell everybody how smart they are. And there's an old saying about it's better to be quiet and people think you're an idiot than to start talking and proving. So here's what I'll tell you. If you're around somebody that knows more than you do about a subject in which you're interested, ask questions and shut up. You will be stunned at what people will tell you. You'll be stunned at what people will tell you in negotiations, because a lot of people are not comfortable with silence. Melinda and I were negotiating a contract years ago. It was a big contract, several million. And we were in a debate on the phone with the person on the other side. And I read in a negotiating tape one time, or listened to a tape, it said the first person that talks loses. So I thought, he made a statement, and I will sit here till I die before I say something. 7.5 minutes. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. And I put it on mute. I'll be here till midnight, if that's what it takes. Guess who talked first? He did. And we got what we wanted. So don't be afraid to be quiet. Silence is not always bad. Are you familiar with weight? Weight in communication. So it goes like this. Why am I talking? So if you're in a meeting, you might want to always think about, why am I going to be talking? Do I really have anything to add? And if I'll just shut my mouth, you guys, if you'll try this, you'll just start laughing. Because people sometimes cannot shut up, and they'll tell you everything. I've had thousands and thousands of patients that I've worked with, and I can tell you, if you just be quiet and listen, they'll tell you all kinds of stuff, most of which you really don't want to know. But in business negotiations, I've had people tell me what their side wanted, the lowest that they would go, just by being quiet. So when you're getting ready to talk, just think about weight. The definition of maturity, what would you say maturity is? Is it old age? It's okay to talk now.
Wisdom.
Pardon me? Wisdom? Okay. How else do you know if somebody's mature?
Patience.
Patience? Yeah.
Experience.
Experience?
Willingness to apply what they learn.
Willing to apply what you learn. So here's my definition. And by the way, none of these things I'm telling you are original. These are things that I've read or watched at a seminar or listened to on a tape. My definition of maturity is somebody who is willing to accept wisdom. Willing to accept wisdom. Because you can go take a class, but if you're not willing to accept what you're being told, it really doesn't do you any good. How to make more money without doing any more work using the 98%, 2% rule. Everybody heard of the 98%, 2% rule? Okay, well, if you're in business, you're going to pay a lot of money in tax. Which for me, it's a lot of money. And what I've learned over time is that most government's tax system rewards people that hire people, create businesses, and build buildings, or have rental property. That's what the tax code lets you do. We had a guy that was teaching a class on this, and he brought in both volumes of the tax code. They're about as thick as an Albuquerque, well, I shouldn't say that, New York City phone book, about this thick, and there were two of them. And he laid them on their side and stacked them on top of each other. And he showed us the top this much was for what tax you have to pay. The rest of it, the other 98%, is your tax deductions that you don't have to pay. Now, I don't like paying tax, but what he taught us was you need to look at how much tax you really have to pay and how can you get deductions. So if you want to make another $10,000, you can have more clients, rent more space, have more equipment, pay more utility bills, or you can learn about the U.S. tax code and how to legally use it to your advantage and save $1,000 or $10,000. And I guarantee you that is a whole lot easier than going out and taking on more overhead. Now, I'm going to give you, it's not on this list, but there's a couple of books that you might want to read. There's one by a guy named Garrett Sutton. Garrett Sutton. Garrett is an attorney he has an office in Wyoming and I think either California or Nevada. And he has written a series of books about business. I don't know how many he's got now, but it's about how to start a company, how to start a corporation. What else are the books about, Melinda?
How to run one.
How to run a corporation. And they're written just for me because they're really on about a 6th grade level. So it's pretty easy to understand. And he's got 5 or 6 books. And then there's a CPA that he's associated with named Tom Wheelwright. And he wrote a book called Tax-Free Wealth. And I've probably read that book, I don't know how many times. I know Melinda's read it quite a few times too. But if you'll take the time to study the tax code, you can sure save yourself a lot of money and do it legally. So this is just how I feel. If I can save $1,000 and I can go spend that how I want versus giving it to the government, I think I'd rather spend it myself. So don't ever do anything that's illegal with your taxes, but just know that there's a whole subculture out there of people that understand the tax code and they don't have to pay a lot of tax. One example is depreciation. It's like free money. And the government allows you to do it. So you have that if you have, for example, a piece of real estate. So anyway, learn about that. Save you a lot of hassle. Actions versus words and why learning about pigs is important in business. Lori's been asking me all day what that's about. When you're involved in business, it's a relationship between one person and another, or one company and another. So you got to think about who you want to be around and who you want to do business with, because not everybody is ethical. And by the way, if you have good ethics and integrity in business, which I try to have, I'm sure I'm not always successful with it, I'm sure. I don't think anybody's perfect. But if you have integrity in business, that is a huge competitive advantage. It takes a long time to build up a reputation, but it doesn't take very long to lose it by doing something. So when I'm trying to make a decision, always in the back of my mind, I'm at least thinking about, is what I'm doing going along with the integrity level that I want to have? So the thing about pigs is this. There's a saying, you might want to write this down. I didn't put it on there, but never wrestle with a pig. You'll both get dirty, and the pig likes it. So be careful about who you're doing business with. If you're doing business with a pig and they want to wrestle, then you need to think about how far in the mud do I want to get down with this person, or do I just want to extricate myself from this situation? How to live today versus tomorrow. So when my wife and I lived in Albuquerque, she was working for a guy named Ken Thompson, who ended up being a mentor of ours for many years. Ken was a good old boy from Oklahoma. I don't think he had anything past a high school education. And he was an incredibly successful businessman. Construction all over the place. He started off as a bricklayer. Later on, he ended up owning the brick making company. So very successful guy. Here's what he told Melinda and I when we were first getting married. He said, if your house and your business is paid for, nobody can whip you. If your house and your business are paid for, nobody can whip you. So when that started, when Melinda and I didn't buy a house, I think I owned my first house, which we still live in, when we were, I was maybe 32, 33. I mean, yeah, so we worked as hard as we could to pay that house off as quickly as we could. We've lived in there now 27 years, and we paid it off in the past. We paid it off early. But once you get to where you don't have to make a house payment, and if you can get your business paid for, where the only thing you really owe on is your monthly expenses, I'm telling you, you can sure sleep good at night with that. So what I have written down here is how to live today versus tomorrow. So you might want to write this down. Live today like others won't. Live today like others won't. So later, you can live like others can't. So later, you can live like others can't. So the only thing worse than being old and sick and ugly is being old and sick and ugly and broke. Now, back when I was in college, back in the 70s and early 80s, the average person, I think, lived to be maybe 63, 64. And most people worked till they were about 60 or 61, so you had about 2 years, and then what happened? They died. Now people are retiring when they're 55, dying when they're 85. So how many years is that? 30 years. So if I were a young person in this room, I would be really concerned about outliving my money. Because what if the average age by the time Mr. Nick is old like me, what if the average age then is 100? And you retire when you're 60. How'd you like to be 90 and run out of money? So when you're thinking about investing, you want to have something that that pays you passively. And if you read that book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is an oversimplification of a lot of things, in my opinion, that will give you some things to think about with that. Now, I want to tell you one more thing about Melinda and I. After we got married, we got married and we were living in an apartment that was about like Losman Thomas, a nice place. Not fancy, but a real nice place. And we had been married about, I don't know, a month. And I was coming home from work and she said, "We're moving." I said, "Really?" And so she took me down to show me where we were going to move. It was a piece of junk trailer house. And the whole time we were there, I don't think we ever got the landlord to even put a bathroom door on it. Our dining room table was a card table, and our couch was just like you used to see in college with the concrete blocks and the whole mattress. So I had never been poor in my life, but I've been in a position where I didn't have much. So when we moved to Alamogordo, we didn't even own a washer and dryer. So we have been able to build ourselves up over time with our finances, but the biggest reason for that is that we've always lived below our means. We bought a house, we got it paid off. We started our businesses, we worked on paying it off. is I don't like being a slave to the lender. So everybody has different theories about debt. I think it's okay for a while if you have a target. Now, have any of you ever read Dave Ramsey? Talk about his stuff. He says no debt ever. I don't really agree with that because if you're going to wait till you can pay cash for everything, you'll be 90 years old before you can ever buy a house. But I also know a lot of people that have gotten head over heels with debt. So you want to think about that also. So I'm very thankful that my wife was supportive of us living below our means, and then we built things up over time. So we didn't feel like, now all of our friends at that time were living in these houses that were pretty fancy, but we chose not to do that. So it's paid off now that I'm 60. I may be ugly, and I may be old, but at least I'm not broke. So that's been a good thing. Last thing I want to tell you is about the time value of money. If you start investing when you're 30, and another person starts investing when they're 55, there is a huge difference. Huge difference. So if you don't have money to invest right now, do what you can to cut your expenses so you at least have a little cash flow. So maybe at some point you'll be able to do that. So, what time is it now? 4:20. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them. Yes, ma'am.
What would you consider the basic, most essential financial education to grow a business?
Here's what I've noticed. There's a lot of people that have business degrees that couldn't figure a deal that their life depended on. So if you want to learn about a financial calculator, how to do a deal, this Gary Johnston has a home study course that you get for $300 or something like that called Money, Not Math. And it teaches you how to figure deals. Now, Gary is one of the teachers. The other person is a guy named Clyde Wilson. Clyde Wilson is 86 years old. I don't know if he ever graduated high school. I don't think he did. He was a fruit and vegetable salesman out of the back of his car when he got started. If you take his classes, sometimes he'll allow you to come out and spend a day with him in the LA area, which my family and I were fortunate enough to do. We started at about 7 o'clock that morning, went till about 10 or 11 o'clock that night, looking at one property after the other, and we never got finished. And those were just his properties in the LA area. So the nice thing about investing is that it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, what you look like, blah, 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 you can do it. You can do it. So I would start with that. I would read any, I just gave you a few books here on this piece of paper to look at. I can't emphasize enough this Gary Johnston class. Just to plant a seed. And if you're older and you have an adult child, or even maybe one that's in high school, a great gift you could give them would be to take them to Gary Johnston's seminar. It will really change your life. And the seminar that Belinda and I went to last weekend, there were 240 people there. And they're all about like people in this room. They're all trying to better themselves. They're not trying to do a get-rich-quick kind of thing. They just want to learn. So that's where I would start. Yes, sir.
Do you have any podcast recommendations for real estate or financial?
This Daniel Lappin that's on the book fair, he has, if you go to his website, he's got some CDs and things about business. So I would just be real careful about getting caught up in some of these programs where they want you to pay a lot of money up front. So this is going to sound silly, but have you ever read any of those books, Books for Dummies? And I've got about 12 of those because they fit me. So you can learn all kinds of stuff about business with those real simple questions. So the amazing thing to me, now that I'm age 60, and I'm not old, but I'm not young, but we have more information available to us at this time in history than ever before. In a lot of ways, I think people are getting dumber. It's just stunning to me. So read a book a week, or a book a month, or get Audible when you're driving around, listen to something like that. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a budget set inside your business for continuing education for your team?
Yes. I've got some of my team here. There's one back here, Miss Jenny.
Hello.
So in fact, she's missing one of her continuing ed classes right now to be here for this. So she's missing part of it. So yes, we do. We invest a lot in continuing ed. Our therapists at our clinic usually have 2 to 3 times what's required to have your license. My wife and I have been to these real estate investing classes that I was talking about. I mean, we've been to 14 or 15. A lot. But the nice thing is you meet people from all over the country that you can start calling and networking with about, hey, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? Anybody else? Okay, so is this helpful? I don't know. If there's an interest, we could probably do more of these. And I will tell you, any business owner that gets up here to talk, if I'm in town, I'll be here. But you just don't tell them what I can learn. So, again, the things I've talked to you about, none of them are original with me. It's just things that I've heard and observed. So, yes, sir?
If you could have done something different starting out, what would you have done?
You know, the truth is, you got to believe in yourself. That's huge. And if you don't believe in yourself, I think it really makes it hard to make progress in life. So this Zig Ziglar book I was telling you about, a friend of mine who was in business gave that to me. I still have the copy he gave me when I was 19. And I started reading about goals and that you can do things. And I wasn't really raised in a household where you were told you're stupid or you can't do this. Both my parents were college graduates. 3 of my 4 grandparents were college graduates. So education was in our home. But I think if you have kids, one of the biggest things you can do is try to encourage them and lift them up and give them confidence. And I'm not talking about this baloney about everybody that participates gets a trophy. One of them, who that is. But lift them up. If you have kids, lift them up. And the direct answer to your question is I would have been more aggressive in business. I would have been taking more risks, more calculated risks. So I tend to play it pretty conservative, but it's turned out okay for me. Now, I know some people that have been fully leveraged. Everything they've got is barred to the hilt. I don't want to be in that. So my business strategy is I buy something, take out a loan, I pay that off as quickly as I can, then I take the cash flow from that one and use it to pay on the next one, to pay that one down quicker. And by the time you get to the 5th or 6th one of those, if you have 4 or 5 pieces of property that are paid for and you have the rent every month coming out of that and you start applying that towards your next purchase, you can really start to get some momentum, and then you don't have to worry as much about people coming and taking your stuff because you can't pay. So I would probably be more aggressive and not reckless. The other thing is I would have read a lot more. Now I've kind of taken a break this year. I'm not reading as many books, but typically I read about 50 books a year, about 1 a week. I either read or listen to it. So the thing is, this is your key. This is what makes your money. It's your brain. So you got to feed it and invest in it. So I would have done more of that. Now, back then, when I was in college, any of you know what an A-track is? Yeah, well, we had 8 tracks, and the next technology came along called a cassette tape. I still have my Zig Ziglar cassette tape thing that I got when I was probably 20. So when that came out. So there's so much information out there available right now. You just can't do it. So pick something and stick with it. Dave Ramsey, I recommend his stuff, especially if you're young. So I see young couple after young couple that are living like this when they can really only afford to live like this, but they can do it because of credit cards. I had an employee that came to me, and this person makes quite a bit of money. They had $52,000 in credit card debt, paying 23%.
Holy cow.
Okay? So you don't want to be in that situation because you're going to do one of two things in life. You're either going to make yourself wealthy, however you define wealthy, or you're going to make somebody else wealthy. And if you're over your head in debt, you're not making yourself wealthy. You're making the people that are loaning you the money wealthy. So that's what I would have done differently. I would have been more assertive, taken more calculated risk, and I would have spent more time educating myself. Yes?
So you're in the health industry and then you're also in real estate. So how does every 4 years when we elect a new president, how do you roll with the punches on that? Do you just literally wait till it happens, or are you constantly thinking about what could be and trying to help yourself get through?
She wants to know, the question is, how much thought do I put in who's going to be the president and how I'm going to invest? I don't worry about it. So I think they're all crazy. So you don't know what they're going to do. So right now, here's what I know. Back in 1981, I had some friends that opened a physical therapy clinic. They were kind of my idols. They were one of the first people in private practice. They were paying 21% interest. I know that's hard to believe. Right now, you can get stuff for 3 to 5, 3 to 6, somewhere in there. So I might look more at that than I would. Here's what I can tell you. In 2008, they say we had a bad problem with the economy. The banks, I think, were making loans to people they shouldn't be loaning money to. Well, I'm here to tell you they're doing it again. So don't be surprised if we get round 2 here pretty soon. And when that happens, do you know who the people are that get ahead? The people that have some cash. So I know a guy that went over to Phoenix. This is 2008, maybe 2009. I don't know the exact year. He bought 6 houses for $150,000. And a few years later, he sold them all for about $800 apiece. Because the market crashed, they had a lot of foreclosures. He had been saving up his money, and he went in there and bought these houses because he knew the market would come back sometime soon. And he just waited for the appreciation in the properties again. And then he got rid of them. And then, because he understood the tax code, he did what's called a 1031 exchange, where you don't pay the tax on the profit, which is a pretty sweet deal. Anybody else?
I came from a place where there's a lot of BNI and networking groups. Do you suggest them, and is there any good ones in the town?
You said BNI?
Yeah.
What is that?
Like, you never heard of BNI? Mm-hmm. Wow, it's really big up north. It's just a place where business owners meet once a week and then exchange cards. You learn about their business, and when you go out into a guild, you network.
I think that everybody's income is directly tied to the number of people they know. So I think networking is great. So yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. But remember, never wrestle with a pig, because you don't know who you're going to get involved with. By the way, my wife and I have had some successful businesses. We've also had 3 that have gone bankrupt. So I guarantee you learn a lot more from those than you do the other. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but if it doesn't go right for you, You just learn from it and move on. You don't sit around saying, woe is me. So, this is a great example for I was trading stock options for a while myself. And I went to all these seminars, learned how to do it, and ended up losing a lot of money doing it. And my wife kept telling me, I don't think you should be doing that. I don't think you should be doing that. And I didn't listen to her. I just kept doing it. Well, she was right, as always. But here's what she told me. She said, the reason that's not working for you is because you're not serving anybody when you're trading stock options. You're not serving anybody. And if you're really going to create something that's of value, you need to be serving other people. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people that have made money with stock options. But in my case, it just didn't work. So if you want to serve people and make more money, if you want to make more money, you've got to serve more people. It's that simple. Is it 12 o'clock yet?
Yep.
1 o'clock? Okay. Thank you all very much for your time.